if you enter the US with someone else's visa or green card, it can be very hard to actually get a green card. But in this video, I'm going to tell you the ways that you may be able to get a green card. I actually have 4 of them. 4 ways that you can still get a green card in the US, even though you may have entered with someone else's visa or green card. I am U.S. immigration attorney Lilian, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their family using the U.S. immigration law system. The first way to get a green card is by being an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen and also having a qualifying relative for a 601 waiver. You have to have both of these things for this to lead to a green card. So an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen is their parent, their children that are unmarried and under the age of 21, and their spouse. If you fit one of these, then you can check off the first requirement of being an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen. The second requirement is that you have a qualifying relative for a 601 waiver. To be a qualifying relative, the person has to be either your spouse or your parent that is a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. Those are the only qualifying relatives for a 601 waiver. So if you are in the US and the only relative you have is your 21-year-old child that's a US citizen filing for you, and you are in this situation that you entered with someone else's passport, you know you need a 601 waiver. Well, you're an immediate relative of your child, right? So you meet the first test, but the second one is having a qualifying relative for a 601 waiver. Your child cannot be a qualifying relative for a 601 waiver. You must have a parent or a spouse that's a U.S. citizen or permanent resident that will suffer extreme hardship if you were not allowed to stay in the U.S. with them, or if they had to leave the U.S. with you. The requirement to have a qualifying relative makes this a difficult thing for people that only have children in the US. They do not have parents or a spouse. That will make it hard for you to get a green card through this way. However, I have 3 other options on this list, so we can go on and talk about those. The next way that you can get a green card is by qualifying for VAWA and qualifying for a 601 waiver. The difference here is, remember I said, with being an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, you will need a qualifying relative for a 601 waiver. But under VAWA, you do not need a qualifying relative in order to have your 601 waiver approved. Okay? VAWA gives special provisions for abused spouse, parent, or child of a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, where if you are in this situation, you qualify for VAWA, but you need a 601 waiver. With VAWA, you can apply for the 601 waiver without needing a qualifying relative. You just need to show hardship to yourself. Okay? So remember, the first one is being an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen. They file for you to get a green card. They file the 601 waiver. You have a qualifying relative. With the VAWA, you're applying for VAWA because you were the abused spouse, parent, or child, right? Spouse, parent, or child of a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. Once that's approved, you have your green card application pending. You can apply for a 601 waiver for that misrepresentation and fraud. And you will not need a qualifying relative. You are the person that needs to show hardship. The hardship has to be to you. Okay? The hardship is to you. If you do have qualifying relatives, that's great. You can add them, but it is not a requirement under VAWA. So that's another way. Like I said, we are trying to find ways for you to still be able to get a green card, even if you entered with someone else's passport or visa or green card. Okay, that's what we're looking for here. So the first way is having an immediate relative that's a US citizen and having a qualifying relative. The second way is if you were the abused spouse, parent, or child of a US citizen or permanent resident and you qualify for VAWA, you can apply for VAWA, apply for a green card, and you can still be able to be approved for a 601 waiver without a qualifying relative. You are the person that will suffer hardship, and you just have to show your hardship. By the way, if you are getting value out of this video, don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with someone that may be in this situation or want to know what they can do to get their green card. The third option available to you if you are in this situation and you want a green card is the T visa. If you qualify for a T visa because you're a victim of trafficking, whether it's sex trafficking or labor trafficking, you would be able to apply for a T visa. Once that's approved, you will eventually be able to apply for a green card. And guess what? You can get a waiver, right? And there's no qualified relative required for the waiver. Okay, you can waive the fact that you entered with someone else's green card, with someone else's visa. You can apply for a waiver for that without a qualifying relative. So that's an additional way that you can overcome this issue. The third way is the U visa. I left this for the last one because this is a longer term process. A U visa right now is taking about 15 years for the visa to be approved, and then for you to wait another 3 years to apply for a green card. But the thing with a U visa is that you can apply for a waiver. Okay, so that's the thing here. You need a waiver. With every single one of these things that I have talked about, you need a waiver. But only one of them has a requirement for you to have a qualifying relative. With the U visa, you have to be a victim of a specified crime, and you have to have suffered because of being a victim of that crime. Okay, so it is a longer term process. However, while the U visa is pending, you can get deferred action. You can get a work permit while that process is going. And then part of that process is applying for the waiver, explaining how you came into the US and why the waiver should be approved. Remember, like I said, this waiver does not have a requirement for you to have a qualifying relative. So this is great for people that may have been a victim of a crime that's specified in this U visa process, and they do not have any immediate relatives in the US. They don't have a spouse. They don't have a parent that is a US citizen or permanent resident to apply for them and to apply for a waiver or to be the qualifying relative for a waiver, right? So it's okay if that's not you, right? If that's first option of being an immediate relative of a US citizen and having a qualifying relative is not an option that you actually have, I wanted to make sure that you have other options, that you know there's other things that could potentially apply to you. So like I said, the U visa is for victims of crime. There is a specific list of crimes. However, if you fit into that, you can get a certification, you can apply for a U visa, and with that U visa application, you can apply for a waiver for the fact that you entered with someone else's visa or green card. And guess what happens when you get to the green card stage? Because on the U visa stage, you had a waiver for entering with someone else's visa and green card, right? You had a waiver already approved for that, for your U visa to be approved. So when you get to the green card, you don't have to worry about applying for a new waiver because you already had it waived on the U visa stage of the case. So when I say you have options, you have options. And one thing you'll notice about all these options, none of them require you to leave the US. Okay? None of these require you to leave the US. You can get it in the US. So I know that is a big concern for people because you want to get a green card. You know you may qualify for one of these, but you're always scared because you're like, I may have to leave the US. I don't want to leave the US. I don't want to leave my kids. I don't want to leave my family to go outside of the US. Well, these are options that are available to you and that you may qualify for, even though, like we said, even though you enter with someone else's visa or green card. But before we end this, I do want to mention that these options that I'm mentioning are specifically for people that entered with someone else's visa or green card. Remember, I never mentioned entering with someone else's US passport because when you enter with someone else's US passport, that is seen as a false claim of citizenship. And in most situations, there is no waiver for it. So it's really important that you do not make a false claim of citizenship, but also know that what we're talking about here is specifically for people that enter with someone else's visa or green card, not US passport. I just wanted to mention that so that if you're in a situation where you enter with someone else's US passport, mention that to your lawyer, right? In the consultation, mention that to me. If you're scheduling a strategy session with me, let me know so that we can figure out if you would qualify for any of the exceptions to that. But if your situation is that you enter with a visa or a green card, then these options are available to you. And I am more than happy to talk to you about how you can apply for these options and if you qualify for these options. If you are in this situation where you entered with someone else's visa or someone else's green card, and you want to know if you qualify for one of these 4 options that I gave in this video, whether it's an immediate relative of a US citizen, whether it's the VAWA, the U visa, the T visa, whether you require a qualified relative or not for the waiver, go ahead and schedule a strategy session with me. It is the best way for you to know what you qualify for, what the next steps will be to get you to a green card. You can schedule that strategy session by going to my website, lillylegal.com, or by calling my office at 508-443-1788. As always, all my contact information is in the description to this video so that you will have easy access to schedule that strategy session.